You have reached the Geek Elite. Good luck. We've made difficult decisions.
And there are still more ahead of us.
2 people aren't enough to save the galaxy.
We need the toughest,
Smartest.
deadliest allies.
We need you.
We need you to join us.
And listen to Reignite.
A certain point of view podcast about storytelling.
Love.
And Mass Effect.
Join us every other Thursday as we fight for the fate of an entire galaxy.
You can find us everywhere you get your podcasts.
Or at certainpov.com/reignite.
We're counting on you.
We should go.
Hey, Mitch!
Hey, Mitch!
Hey, Mitch!
Hey, Mitch!
Hey, Mitch!
Hi-yo! Mitch! What up, Mitch?
Orderly Mitch.
Hey, Mitch.
Okay,
Hey,
Mitch.
Hey, Mitch.
What up, Mitch? Hey, Mitch. Hey, Mitch.
What up, Mitch?
Hey, Mitch.
Hey, Mitch. Hey, Mitch. Hey, Mitch.
Hey, Mitch.
Hey, Mitch? Hey, Wyatt.
Mitch.
Hi, Mitch. Hey, Mitch.
Hey, Mitch.
Hey, Mitch. Hey, Mitch.
On tonight's episode of Hey Mitch, I have a very special guest, the creator of Joystick Angels, TJ Sterling.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? Happy to be here.
Thank you for coming on. This comic book had a very successful Kickstarter campaign, and I want to say that it looks amazing, but then also the idea of a soundtrack to go along with it, that's pretty incredible.
Thank you, man. I appreciate that. Yeah, I've always loved different stuff. Like, I was that guy in the comic book shop that just liked different comics. I was buying manga before manga was popular. I really, really loved unique storytelling. And for me, as a publisher now, I try to think about what's my ethos. What do I live and die by? And that's really just unique content. Every book we do should be unique, should be fun, should be different, and it shouldn't be like anything that you're seeing on the market currently.
Now, you described it as a space opera, or at least a few things before that. Now, please describe Joystick Angels.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to. So again, if everybody's listening, my name is TJ Sterling. I'm the president lead artist of RAE Comics, and Joystick Angels is our second title from RAE Comics, and it is a YA space opera comic series centered around 5 young kids of color who have a latent superhuman ability. I'm sorry. Let me rewind the tape on that. As I'm thinking of the other book. It's 5 young space pilots who are tasked with saving the universe. You guys can tell I'm a little tired since it's late, and I talk about all these other IPs that I have. So forgive me, but Joystick Angels, YA superhero title, about 5 young kids who need to save the universe from an evil alien empire.
Now, also the spaceships that they pilot all look pretty awesome and unique. Like, are they just as unique as each individual character that pilots them?
Absolutely. That's a great question. I don't think anyone's ever asked me that, so thank you. Each ship is kind of tailored to the specific characters, who are on the team. So the kind of the setting of Joystick Angels is post-apocalyptic, super far distant future where Earth has basically been wiped out, and the last human colony, all humans are now living on a space station called the Leapor Space Station. And essentially it's become this militaristic society where the highest honor is the military effort, and each space squadron is teamed with 5 kids or 5 pilots, and they all have to fight to become the best, and whoever is the best gets to lead the charge against the Icaria, and each ship is kind of tailored to their specific skill set. For example, the leader, Fox, is a very brash, and kind of a strong-willed character. So his ship is extremely aggressive. It has a lot of guns, lots of really cool, force fields and shields and things that you would expect from a fighter pilot that's kind of on the defense, on the offense all the time. Fast forward or go to another character like Legs, for example. She's like the resident tech officer on the team, and her ship is riddled with different types of cool tech items like drones and different types of robotic armatures and things like that. So each ship kind of is, specific to what these characters can do and what they're going to be doing in the story.
No, each one of the ships in the preview art that you have up, like, obviously is tailored to each character. So I wanted to hear all about that, how each one is definitely suited for the character that's piloting it. So that sounds awesome. What is it that drove you to this particular story?
Honestly, I have this humongous love for the 80s and 90s, really everything in the 80s and 90s, but specifically the video games. Joystick, shoot 'em up type of games. The Star Foxes, the Gradius, the Darius Twins, like, I absolutely love those types of games. And that particular brand where it's like you have this ship and it's in space fighting these weird, crazy, creatures from another dimension or another world. And I always thought it was such a cool concept. And then on top of that, I'm a huge Star Trek and Star Wars fan. Like, growing up, that was my dad's two favorite movies or two favorite IPs or properties. And we would always go to the theaters or watch them when they came out or rewatch them 100 times. So I loved those things because I guess it's just what I grew up watching. And my thing is that I never really saw a lot of diverse representation in those types of movies. You'd never see someone, you can see maybe one Black person, one Asian person, one Hispanic person, maybe no Indian people at all. So, again, I came up in a relatively multicultural town in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and all of my friends were from different places. I had friends from the Philippines and India and Ghana and different parts of, Africa. So for me, diversity was so normal in my regular circle, but it just wasn't normal in the world at the time. So for me, it was like, I kind of had like this, I don't know, it sat with me and I'm like, man, I would love to tell a story that features, more diverse cast in the future in space doing really cool stuff.
It's definitely hitting that mark. So I'm stoked about the whole thing. Which one of these 5 characters is your darling? Which is the one that, you love to write the most?
That's a great question, man. I think each one of them are, based on people that I know. I would say Legs is probably is starting to become my favorite character out of all of them. When you look at Legs, her Legs is her code name, and her full name is Aisha Garcia, and she is the Afro-Latina queer character who is the resident tech officer who builds all the ray guns and fixes the ships, and she's the tech person that can figure out anything mechanically, and she's kind of an underdog character, and she's also the youngest in the group. So she's got a little bit to prove versus like the leader, Fox, who's the oldest. So the dynamic is very interesting, and I'd say she's kind of the character that's really slowly becoming my favorite.
Nice. I love that. Did you have inspirations for each one of these character designs?
Yeah, well, for me, when you look at Fox, the main character, he's got this Lionel Richie 1985 Jerry curl thing going on. This, Michael Jackson Thriller Jerry curl. So you can obviously see there's, the 80s reference in there. You've got Tank, who's kind of, Cassandra Middleton is her real name. She's got like this, Stacey Dash Clueless thing going on where, her outfits are very loud and super fashionable. And Dragonetti is like very, Jacob Marks, aka Dragonetti. He's like the super fun guy that likes to party and loves music and dancing and, fashion. So his fashion sense is really kind of off the wall and different. So it's definitely based on, again, the time period, music, what looked cool back then. I mean, I've got this really cool variant cover that just got done for one of my artists. It's kind of a throwback to, Purple Rain. So, we're kind of sticking in that area of like references and kind of inspiration as we're creating these characters.
Yeah, no, it's showing through, and that's super cool. Like, we're definitely going to have to hear that soundtrack and hopefully get the 80s and 90s reference in there too.
Absolutely, man. Me and my brother, we were literally hanging out. We lived together. We got an apartment together here, and in the New York City area, and we were just talking about comics, and because my brother is relatively known to a lot of the people in the comic book world because he's come to conventions with me for years. He's always been kind of like my road manager. He makes sure that I'm eating and drinking and getting my commitment done and all that good stuff. So he's like, yeah, man, what are you thinking? What are you thinking about? What's on your mind in terms of comics? I'm like, well, this is this story. I had this idea about, what if we did like a shoot 'em up style space opera, thing that, and he's like, yeah, that'd be a great idea. So I'm like, well, we should do something really different. We can write it together, but why don't you make some music for it? And then I see his eyes kind of perk up a little bit because, by trade, my brother Spencer is a musician. He plays, tuba and, piano and guitar, and he plays so many different instruments as well as, digital stuff with, he produces a lot of music and arranges and engineers stuff. So he's already working in the space of hip hop, R&B, techno, EDM, and because he grew up in the 80s just like I did, he loved the 80s and 90s music of that era. So it was just kind of an appropriate thing, like doing an OST. How many comic books can you go to a con and walk up and there's a composed OST from a professional musician? It's almost unheard of.
Unheard of, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, just so the light bulb went off and it just all kind of fell into place.
That's incredible. So then if this is an inspiration that came from, going to conventions and just having the conversation with each other, what was the duration of the process, like from that moment to first pages being printed?
That's a great question, man. I would say that if I'm rewinding the tape, we've been in production for about a year behind the scenes. And, rewind time a year ago, COVID was kind of rampant right around this time.
Mm-hmm.
And we came up with this idea for this book right before COVID. So our artist had started it. He was already halfway through the book, and he actually got COVID. While he was working on the book, Nats Ledesma, a Filipino gentleman, he lives in the Philippines. He also works in the healthcare industry. So he's not a full-time artist, but he is someone like us who really wants to be in the business full-time. And that, when he got sick and needed some time to heal, we had to pause for a little bit. So we've been slowly, finishing the rest of everything. And we just finished with all the artwork last week, the week of the campaign. So it was kind of like, I cannot, in good conscience, have a Kickstarter offering or have anything to offer people if I don't have something done. So we were waiting as long as possible to get it right.
And with the Kickstarter campaign, you talk about in your video that you had the plan for the two, and you were going to make them. So what was the goals, the money being raised from the Kickstarter going to go towards?
Absolutely. So first and foremost, the stretch goal that we had once we broke past our initial goal was, I think it was 10K, and that was basically going to allow us to pay our artists a higher page rate. So our penciler, our colorist, our letterer, our editor are all going to get paid a higher page rate than what they normally get paid. So it's our way of kind of saying thank you to them for investing so much time and effort into making this project amazing, because everybody looks at it, says, oh, I love the art. I love the colors. I love that you have an editor on board. Our letterer, Duran Bennett, is a seasoned guy who is, currently up for an Eisner nomination. So he's got tons of experience and has done lots of work for us. And we just wanted to say thank you to them. So that was our first stretch goal of 10K. And then everything on before, like onward, was raising funds for issue 2, so we could pay them, pay for for the next book. We could get everybody some enamel pens, get some T-shirts. We've got a master class in there, so that's also incorporated. So just trying to keep the wheels turning, man, because it feels like people really want to see more than one book, and we want to get it to them quickly.
Definitely. I mean, I think the last time I saw it was at 260% raised. So you have a fan base out there, and they're ready to read more. So that is incredible.
Super critical.
As you said, this is the second book of RAE Comics, and I don't want to sound rude. I don't know how to pronounce the first book.
It's totally fine, man. That, the whole intention was with my first series, Okemos, was to raise a lot of eyebrows, make people think like, what is this? And really, Okemos is a place and not a person. So, I mean, a typical superhero book, you'd get it to be Superman, Batman, Wonder Man, whatever. But with this, we're actually getting the place in which all the characters originate from. So if you think about Mount Olympus or something like that, it's got the same type of vibe going on. But Okemos is a sci-fi martial art action story centered around a young kid that has a latent superhuman ability that could potentially save the human race. Got lots of 80s and 90s Sentai vibes in there. It's got Dragon Ball Z vibes in there. I practiced martial arts for over 10 years. I got a black belt in Okinawan Shorin-ryu karate. So, martial arts is a huge part of, who I am as a person and, my life. So a little bit of that inspiration is in there. So, and there's 5 books in that series. So if people are listening to this and they want to check out other books that we have, we've got another series that's almost halfway done. So perfect time to get into what we have at RAE Comics.
Oh yeah, RAE Comics sounded like right up my alley. I'm loving this. So being a seasoned martial artist as you are, like, how did that affect in writing, like, I assume moves and actions into your character?
Yeah, I've gotten a lot of compliments over the years about how the pacing and the action is in the story of Okemos. And it's the biggest compliment I could probably get from anybody, because it means, okay, like, I still remember how to do my forms. I still remember how to do things correctly. Because, whether it's like, let's say if somebody's coming at you with a punch and you hit them with some type of a side block, or if someone's coming at you with a roundhouse, there's a specific way to dodge that correctly, or to minimize the amount of damage or impact that you might get from a specific kick. So if the character takes a knee to the face and then walks, or, just gets up and walks away, not really all that realistic. You get a knee to a face, something's going to break. You might get a concussion. You might black out. Like, these are types of things you have to understand when choreographing action in a sequential form. So a lot of those kind of more realistic type of fighting things, kind of occur. And I think what people like about, like, for example, Invincible, the animation, the cartoon that just came out, is how realistic it would be. Okay, if you get Superman flying at you 200 miles an hour and punches you, your head's probably going to shatter into a million pieces. You're not going to get punched into the next panel. You're going to die. So these are types of realistic things that you have to think about, or at least I like to think about when I'm choreographing action.
No, yeah. I mean, the more realistic, I think, makes it so that your reader is not being patronized, right? So that's pretty great. Starting up RAE Comics, like, what was the process behind that? Like, what was the I'm just going to do it myself kind of mentality?
I've always been interested in comics. I came up with the idea for Okemos, that series, and this POC Sentai, if you will, back when I was in high school, like 97, 98. And I knew that I wanted to do something with it. I just didn't know how, because I really wasn't that great of an artist at the time. And I knew that I loved art, and I knew I wanted to have a career in it. And I just didn't know how I was going to get to my destination, but I stayed on course. So I finished, high school with a concentration in art. I eventually went on to college, and then, got a degree in Bachelor of Fine Arts and Illustration. So I learned traditional illustration, painting, drawing, a little bit of animation. And then I would eventually go to Marvel and intern for them in New York City. And that's where I learned quite a bit of my, comic book business experience and understanding how things work and how you interface with freelancers. A lot of that came from the good folks at Marvel. And I'm extremely grateful and appreciative for them to giving me a chance, because there was a line around the corner for people that wanted to be an intern, but they saw something in me and wanted to bring me on. Spent about a year interning with them. And once I got done, I don't know, I started to kind of rethink this whole idea of, do I want to play in someone else's sandbox, or do I want to create my own sandbox? I already have these characters and these ideas for IP. So why not do something with them? Why not try something unique out that hasn't been done? And I think that's kind of what fueled me the most, because, you either wanted to be, at that time, like we're talking about 2010, it was like, okay, I can go for a penciler job or an inker job or a colorist job, or I can go for a writing gig. And those are the main two things. There really wasn't a lot of people like, hey, I'm going to start my own indie publishing label. It was so few, like so rare at the time. Like there really wasn't a lot of it. Especially like one guy doing everything, or maybe one or two guys, or a small team. And now like there's indie people out the wazoo. Like, I don't know, like COVID, like it sprouted up indie comic companies like weeds. They're all over the place. But yeah, to answer your question, I just wanted to create my own sandbox and play in it and do anything and everything that I ever wanted to do.
What was the biggest obstacle that you found in starting up your own comic company?
Well, because I was drawing my first comic book, my biggest thing was, maintaining a decent deadline. I mean, I had never drawn on a deadline before. That's not true. I drew on a deadline in college. So I had like one art project to do. But, I don't think people realize like how incredibly, detailed drawing comic book pages are. It's a lot of work. I mean, a painting could be one image, but if you got a comic book page, you've got several images that all have to be really, really detailed, and they have to flow right, and they have to make sense, and you can't reuse the same poses. Like there's so many rules within the scope of making comics. So my biggest thing was, I've hired myself as an artist, maintaining the deadline, and then also kind of balancing out, the right printer to use, the right, having enough money to go to a con. Like the first con I ever did was San Diego Comic Con, and I was living in New York at the time. So traveling across country to do a show, and, it was a hell of a lot of money. Like I didn't realize that when you fly to a con that's as big as San Diego, there's something called event pricing in hotels. That means it's double the price of what it is normally. So what you would probably pay for 3 nights at a hotel, maybe $300-400, now shoots up to $800, $900 to $1,000. So, I'm a guy that, this is a little bit after the housing market crash, and the economy's on the rebound, but still, that's a hell of a lot of money to spend on a weekend. So
no kidding, yeah.
There's tons of challenges that popped up, and now it seems like things are getting a little easier, but yeah, definitely.
I mean, I assume that you're also making it to other smaller cons, at least when we were still having conventions. Like, how are you finding that for spreading the word of RAE Comics?
Yeah, I would say that small cons are my favorite nowadays, because you think about it like this. There's so much, you go to a big con and there's so much stimulus, like, oh, hey, give me your money. That is everywhere. From the time the fan the fan is outside to the time they walk in, there's all this, attention grabbers, because people want their money, whether it's the local food store or whether it's the parking, going to Comic-Con has become very, very expensive. And, just food for thought, ladies and gentlemen. 2005, you could buy a ticket to San Diego Comic-Con for $50. Now, 15 years later, it's $300 for a weekend pass or more. So that's not even including the flight to get out there if you don't live there, the hotel accommodations, parking, food. Like it's a very, very pricey endeavor. And then, to walk into a con and then want to, how much money do I have? Oh, I don't really have a lot of money. I literally have to go to that booth, and that booth. And that's all. So a lot of times with bigger shows, people's pockets are kind of drained and empty, and the pots or the pond has been fished out before they even get into the door, or half an hour after they get into the door. And I feel like with smaller cons, you get to meet people one-on-one. There's a little bit less pressure. It's not as pricey for them to get in. Most of the time it's free on a lot of these shows. So you can really spend time with quality people and make decent money as a creator.
Yeah, no, the smaller cons are definitely a lot easier to get up as a person who attends to talk to the creators and artists and all that. So that's great. I think my first year, was for San Diego Comic Con. It was 2007. We actually walked up to the door and got our ticket, and that was I think that was the last year that you were able to do that. Like, you could not do that anywhere. You have to do the lottery now. With RAE Comics, like, in your schooling of illustration, animation, is there ever going to be some animated versions of these characters that you've drawn in these two books?
I mean, that's the plan, man. Absolutely. I mean, I think when people look at Joystick Angels, it screams anime. It screams like, hey, I would love to see this on Netflix. And people are getting Voltron vibes. And I'm hearing all kinds of stuff. And I'm really excited about that, because ultimately we want to be able to have like a collective vision within our fan group. Like, hey, everyone's thinking about this animation thing. Everybody wants it. So, maybe if I'm asking, $4,000 to create an animated pitch, people are like, oh yeah, that's a great idea. I'm totally for it. And that's really where the community comes into play. I'm super grateful for everybody. And I do try to tell everybody, though, like, I understand we're in the Netflix generation. People want it right now, but before Spider-Man or X-Men became an animated series, they had 30 years of content. Like, they got 5 years of content. Let me make some more books. Let me fill the shelves, let me do a little bit of that. And then I promise you, we will get you the animation in the movie. Just give me some time.
When you're creating, when you sit down to create, what's your process? Do you have to make sure there's no noise, or do you need candles burning? Do you need white noise playing in the background? Yeah,
I mean, for me, I'm a big music guy. I love music. I think if I'm super hyped up, then I may throw on, some heavy metal, or maybe I'll throw on some hip hop. If I'm a little bit more on the mellow side, I may throw in some music from the 70s, some old school R&B. I mean, jazz. I mean, anything that I'm kind of is suiting my fancy at the moment helps me get into that creative zone. I mean, right before this interview, I was drawing, ladies and gentlemen. So, the grind never stops. But yeah, I mean, for me, just my noise canceling headphones, some good music, and, sitting in front of my drawing tablet, and I'm good to go.
Now, so then when you were doing Joystick Angels, which came first, the soundtrack that your brother made, or the work that you did?
So on this one, we wrote the book. We wrote the story first. So we did that, and then we got a totally different artist this time. So because I'm drawing Alchemist as an ongoing series, I don't have the bandwidth to take on another drawing responsibility for another book. I wouldn't be able to do it. I'd have to clone myself. And I don't know how to do that yet, ladies and gentlemen, but if I figure it out, I'll be telling you first. But yeah, so we hired an outside artist, and essentially what I acted as is more of a lead, and a creative lead and a creative director. This is what I want to see per page. They're sending me, stills and sketches, and I'm approving stuff based on how I think the storytelling will be correct. And that allows me to continue to keep drawing Alchemist, and then, continuing to write other stuff too. So
then what was the soundtrack? Do you not do music while you're writing also?
Typically Yeah, I'd have to listen to some white noise while I'm writing.
Okay.
I think because I'd have to listen to an instrumental, something like an OST from a movie, or, I mean, I love the Oblivion soundtrack. I love, again, old video game soundtracks, Iron Man, Captain America. Like, I love those types of things. And I will listen to that while I'm writing because the sound for me just gets me into the zone of writing. But if it's lyrics, then I start thinking about it. That bleeds into the words that I'm typing. But yeah, I mean, music is a big part of what I do. And clearly it's a big part of what my brother does too. And that's why him being a comic lover, it's like, oh, this is perfect. I get to create music for a comic finally.
What is the thing that you geek out about that maybe most people wouldn't suspect? I mean, if it happens to be like you really enjoy mowing the lawn, like what's that geeky thing about you?
Two things. I mean, since we're talking about music, I'm a huge follower of composers.
Nice.
Like, I mean, I follow guys like James Horner and Brian Tyler and Hans Zimmer and, Ramin Djawadi. I don't know if I'm saying his last name correct, but he's the guy who did the Iron Man soundtrack and Game of Thrones. So I follow their careers in terms of what projects they jump to. And I'm very much a fan of how like different each project there is. Cause like the music that Brian Tyler did for the Expendables is incredibly different than what he did for the Marvel movies. So I'm super geeked out about the music part. I love directors too. Like I follow directors like you wouldn't believe, because to me, they're like what we're doing as comic book artists. We're directors, it's the same type of thing. And I'm also a big sneakerhead, so I collect sneakers too.
Nice.
So there's that.
All right. So first I need to know top 3 movie scores for you.
Great question. I guess in terms of what I listen to most, definitely Batman Begins with Hans Zimmer, the first one. Let's see here. I think it's M82 and Trent Reznor for Oblivion.
Nice.
Again, Iron Man 1 soundtrack with Ramin Djawadi, definitely my favorite. And then there's one more that I can't remember the name of. I think I'd probably say out of all the Marvel soundtracks, it's between Iron Man and Captain America Winter Soldier. Like when Winter Soldier first appeared, that soundtrack I love. I think that might be James Horner, or I can't remember the name of the guy who did it, but those are the top 4.
Those are the top ones right there. All right. What's the prized possession sneaker in the collection then? I mean, I have absolutely no background in this, so you could be making it up and I wouldn't know.
So I guess I could say the most expensive pair of sneakers I've ever owned. Well, I got them retail. So I won a Nike lottery and I got a pair of these off-white Jordan Chicago 1s, size 12, which is a very, very common size. I bought them for $160 and I sold them for $2,500 the next day.
Nice.
So that's probably the most prized possession I've ever had, because I'm like, wait a minute, this is like the lottery. So like I'm selling this shit immediately. I paid off a credit card with that money. Like, insane.
I mean, that makes complete sense to me. I mean, you use it to your advantage. So there you go.
Absolutely.
When you're creating, like, do you have maybe a person in mind for these characters to play, quote unquote, if it ever made into a live action thing?
Oh, movie casting, that's a,
I mean, I don't know if you want to put it out there.
Yeah, I haven't really done that yet. I mean, so I thought about it for Opus, for example. So you guys can kind of see, well, I mean, you won't see it because this is audio, but, in my background on the video during the Zoom call, you got to see the cast of characters of Okemos. Massar, the guy in purple, who's kind of like the, enforcer on the indie comic book series Okemos. He's one of the villain characters. He's based on my very good friend, my childhood friend, Jin Yu, who is a 6'3", big, huge Asian guy from China who he looks like a monster. He's huge. He's the biggest person, one of the biggest people I've ever seen in my life. But that's who the character is based on. So I'm constantly thinking, like, I'm constantly talking to Jim, like, do you know another Asian man of your size and stature that could play this character? And he's like, I don't know anybody. So it may have to be him. Like, I may just pick people that I knew and I went to high school with. So, I mean, that's the possibility as well.
I mean, I think they'll probably enjoy being able to do that kind of thing too. So
that's right. I'd love some unknowns. I mean, the thing for me is that I get it. Like, okay, Marvel wants to do and DC wants to do, hey, we're going to get big budget actors to jump on our movies. And it gives them this, heavy weight. Like, oh, we've got an Oscar winner that's playing, so-and-so's character. But for me, I almost feel like working with slightly more unknown actors that have a lot more to prove and want to bring something to these characters, or more comic book fan related like actors. So for me, like, Superman was a perfect choice. Henry Cavill for Superman was a perfect choice because he was a known actor before he was Superman, but he wasn't a super humongous, well-known actor at the time. So he's kind of like a low-key guy, but he was a huge comic book fan. He loved Superman comics. So he brought like a certain fandom to the character. And he also looked so much like what Superman could be that I just think that he became even more popular because of Superman. And now he does everything. But like before, he was kind of a relatively unknown guy. So I kind of like that type of formula versus let me just get a big Hollywood actor on the project.
No, I think that sounds perfect. That's exactly what we want to see, because otherwise you get the big names and they kind of distracts away from the story, right? It kind of distracts from the movie. Can I ask about your time at Marvel? Like what kind of experience that was?
Sure. Yeah. So I started working in the basement of Marvel Comics. And at the time, they had an office on Madison Avenue, right in, around the area of the Empire State Building in Manhattan. And it was an old Japanese bank that they had their offices in. So but it also used to be a bakery before that. So like the walls were stained. Like it was just a very, very decrepit, old, crappy building. But there's this wealth of comic book knowledge in there. And I started out sending freelancer comps to artists across the world. So you work on a book, you get a copy of it, or you get several copies. So I was always interfacing with guys like Mark Millar or, John Romita Jr., or whoever was in the building or needed books. I was always talking to them. And my boss, Fenton Ang, was a really cool guy and a lot of fun. And, he said, hey, they're hiring upstairs for a design related position because, they forgot that, hey, TJ is going to college for art and design. Maybe we should talk to him. So they bring me upstairs. I interview him. I show my portfolio and they're like, hey, this guy's got some skills. Let's bring him on. So then I became a production assistant. And essentially, I was receiving all the comic book pages from various different artists, and I was, cleaning them up and, sizing them for print and making sure they were getting into the correct InDesign files. And, it was a lot of, production management type of thing. And it was really cool because, I was in the bullpen and I got to meet a whole bunch of artists, and it was just such a fun gig, man. And really, I got to understand more of the mechanics of how to create a comic book, because most people don't even know. I was explaining to a buddy of mine about how to create a PDF and how important it is to have a PDF for your digital comics. But if no one teaches you, then how are you going to know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, obviously you use the knowledge you gain there to put forth something that's awesome. What are you watching right now? What are the things that you are enjoying?
Yeah, I'm currently watching Loki, which I really like. I think they're doing, for me, Loki was one of those characters. He was pretty much in everything. Like he was in almost every Marvel movie that was important, and he was starting to get a little stale to me. And I think that with this series, they're kind of keeping him fresh. Like, this is a different Loki. This isn't the Loki that gets killed by Thanos. So, but this is the bad Loki that kind of sees the light at the end of the tunnel. Like, hey, you have the opportunity to be good, which is kind of a cool carrot to dangle in front of somebody's face. Like, you have like there's a path in front of you, and you can kind of tell what it is. So that was really cool. I'm excited to see what the rest of that series is about. Before that, I was watching Captain America: Winter Soldier, Invincible. What else? I'm also watching. I just finished watching Sweet Tooth on Netflix, which was incredible. So that's what I'm into at the moment.
What about reading? Are you reading any comic books?
At the moment, I am reading Thomas River by Brian Selfries. That's the book that I have in my hand. Well, that I'm currently trying to finish. And an old Electra Tale by Bill Sienkiewicz and Frank Miller. Those are the two books that are on my desk right now.
I know that you obviously love to play in your own sandbox, as you put it earlier, and create your own characters. But I assume at one point you were all about drawing some characters from the big two. What are your characters?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I would probably say my number one favorite comic book character is Swamp Thing. I've always wanted to draw Swamp Thing, wanted to tell a cool Swamp Thing story. Some of my favorite comic books ever written are Swamp Thing stories by like Alan Moore, excuse me. And the last one, which I thought was masterful, by it was the Rock World series, and I'm blanking on the writer and the artist on it, but it'll come back to me. But definitely Swamp Thing. I'm a huge Batman fan too, so I loved Batman growing up as a kid. I thought Batman was way cooler than Superman. He had the car, he had the women, he had pretty much everything, the cool gadgets, the tech, the villains gallery. To me, like, I don't think, like, if you think about like some of the best villains gallery, like Batman probably got the best villains gallery next to somebody like Spider-Man.
Yeah.
To me, Superman's rogues gallery really isn't all that exciting. It's like, whatever. But yeah, I'd say probably those two, Batman and Swamp Thing, for sure.
Very cool. All right, so we've come to the part where I like to put the guest on the spot and ask the question: if you could have a completely useless superpower, what would that power be? And it has to be useless.
Useless things in life. Let's see here.
So one of the example that I usually give is that if my useless superpower would be to like grow my hair exactly 1 inch, and that's it. That's all I can do, and it's it takes a while before I can do it again.
Yeah, it's pretty useless. Yeah. Like, I need more, especially me. People can't see the video, but I'm bald, ladies and gentlemen, and I'd love to grow more hair.
But you have a glorious beard.
That's the redeeming quality. I'm very, very excited about how fantastic this beard looks. And right now, it's not oiled up or anything, ladies and gentlemen. But when it is, you're going to see that it kind of glistens in the light. It's epic.
There you go. Epic beard.
I'd say, yeah. So maybe a useless, power could be like, I could automatically clip one toenail and not the other 9, like, like, damn it, I haven't figured out how to do the rest.
I love that. Yep. It's just like, well, I got the one, now I got to go get the clippers.
So useless.
What would be the one piece of advice that you would want to give to someone else that wants to follow the path that you're doing? Or what's the one piece of advice that someone gave you that really stuck with you?
I'll give you everyone who's listening a general piece of advice. Entertain every idea that you have. Believe in absolutely every thought, idea that comes to your mind. Inspired thought is really there for people who want it. You come up with a great idea, it's like, you should never let it go. Write it down, act on it. I mean, people have great ideas all the time, but most folks don't act on them. So if you feel like there's an idea that has legs, that sticks with you, act on it. believe in yourself 100%, and just trust your judgment, man. I think one thing I'm pretty solid at is trusting my own personal judgment when it comes to comics and what I think is cool, and, you know, seeing around the corner. 2015 rolled around and Okemos was the only Sentai comic book on the shelves at the time. The only one. There was no Power Ranger comics. There was no VR Troopers. There was no any Sentai book you can think of. No Ultraman. But now Sentai's back, and it's back big. Like, but rewind the tape. Why would I want to do something that no one was doing? But I trusted my instincts, and this was something that now people look at. Okemos is a series that can rival those other big IPs, that can stand next to them relatively equally, because they know that I love the genre. But I'd also say too, if you're an artist, being an artist is a marathon that you never ever stop running. So, you could be really, really bad and really suck, and then you could be incredible, but it just takes time between point A and point B, and you just can't give up. You just have to continue working at the craft every single day. I draw every day, guys, every day, even if it's a small thing. I draw every single day, or I write every single day. Like, this is kind of how it works. Like, if you want to win a race, you have to be on the field or on the track pretty much all the time.
There you go. Always be grinding, right?
Right.
Any are you already booked for any cons coming up? Like, now that COVID is kind of on the downswing?
Yeah, I'm going to be at BlurredCon in Crystal City, Virginia, from July 17th to the 19th, I think. After that, I'm going to be at AwesomeCon in Washington, D.C. I think that's in August. And then shortly after that, I'll be at DragonCon in Atlanta. That's
nice.
Like Labor Day weekend.
Mm-hmm.
And then I may make an appearance at New York Comic Con and possibly Baltimore Comic Con later in the year, depending on how everything goes. So we'll see.
Very cool. What's the place that people can find you or RAE Comics best?
Yeah, super easy, guys. So I'm at RAE Comics. That's RAE Comics on Twitter, on IG. And my website is raecomics.com, RAEcomics.com. You can get back issues of Okemos from 0 all the way up to number 4. Issue 5 also comes out this August. You also can pre-order Joystick Angels, our successful Kickstarter that just closed a few days ago, is now available for pre-order on my site. So you can also jump on and grab that too, with a host of other things like t-shirts, toys, enamel pins, and a whole bunch of other really cool stuff like art prints. So take a look at the website and connect with me or drop me a line. I'd love to chat with you.
Yes, please go and follow and buy all the things to support RAE Comics, because TJ's making some great things here.
Thank you, man. Appreciate it.
If you want to find me on Twitter, I'm at Mitchipedia GEM. GEM stands for Geek Elite Media. The rest of Geek Elite Media is at Geek Elite Media on Twitter, at Geek Elite Media on Instagram, and Facebook.com/Geek Elite Media is our Facebook page. Check out archived episodes of this podcast and other podcasts on our network on our website, geekelitemedia.com. But until next time, this is Hey Mitch on the Geek Elite Media Network saying always remember to geek out.
This concludes our broadcast. Beep.